In our last movie, we set up a function, custom function, to handle our errors, and we were able to use our custom function to generate errors both when our validation rules were violated and when system errors were generated by our script. However, there are limitations to this approach. For instance, we may want to add some error handling for the connection. We may want to add error handling for our MySQL query, and we may, with a much larger and more complex script, want to add error handling to a whole raft of different kinds of functions within our script that may, under certain circumstances, generate an error. We have no way of foretelling which functions are going to generate errors. If we could, we wouldn't need to worry about any of this. We just iron out all the errors and look into our crystal ball and create perfect PHP scripts every time. This being an unrealistic scenario, we have to think about a way of setting up a consistent error handling system that we don't have to invoke on every line that we want to use it. Luckily, as of PHP version 4, there is a system whereby we can replace PHP's error handling function with our own custom error handler. How we do that is with a simple line of code called set error handler, and then we put the name of our function. We should include this at the beginning of our script so that PHP will be using this function, fail in this case, anytime it hits an error. Now the way this works is that anytime PHP finds an error, either through faulty syntax or through an error resulting from user data being entered in our script going haywire, it will invoke the fail function rather than its standard error handling, error message generating function. Now, for an error handler, PHP has certain criteria for the kind of function that will be acceptable. It has to take two arguments, the first of which has to be an error number, and the second of which should be the error message that it's going to generate. Now, the reason it needs to know the error number is that there are different classes of errors within PHP. I won't go into a great deal about this, detail about this, but you can have a look in your PHP manual and have a look at the different kinds of errors that PHP uses. As you can see, they're all numbered. They're given binary numbers here, and they also have more user-friendly aliases in words with underscores between them. Now, we won't go into great depth about what all the different errors mean. All we need to know for now is that certain of these errors are fatal errors which, when thrown up by our scripts, will cause the script to terminate. This is an example of a fatal error, e-user error, and the other one that is relevant to us is e-error. Now, if you look at this list closely, you'll notice that there are other fatal errors such as compile error, fatal compile time errors. There's nothing we can do about these errors in terms of our custom error handling because this will have happened before any of our script is evaluated. So the ones we're interested in are e_error and e_user_error, both of which will, in PHP's default system, generate a fatal error and stop the program from executing. Let's go back to our script and have a look here. And the way we use the error number here, if we want to simulate the same way of handling errors as the standard PHP error handling, of course we're going to use our own error messages here. We're going to use our whoops and the hyperlink at the bottom, but we're going to simulate the differentiation between fatal and non-fatal errors that the standard error handler uses. And we're going to do this by a simple if condition, which is going to test either for e-user error or e-error, the two kinds of fatal errors that we're concerned with here. And if either of these happen, then it's going to give the hyperlink and terminate executing the script. Let's save that. And usually, when this function is invoked, it will be invoked by PHP itself, and the error number will be fed to the function, as will the error message, depending on the situation that caused the error in the first place. So we can take out this line, and if we go up here, we're going to look at a way to trigger the error without a real error occurring. And when we do this, instead of PHP automatically filling in the blanks for us, because we've triggered the error arbitrarily, we have to first of all give the message and also tell PHP what kind of error it is. So let's say it's a user error, because that'll make sure that the script terminates and the hyperlink is given. And we're going to do the same with this. Now you may notice that the sequence in which the arguments are given under the trigger underscore error function is the opposite way round from the way that we have to take arguments in this function. This is confusing. I don't know a good reason why this is the case, but as long as we remember that we have to, when using the trigger error function, put the two arguments the other way round from the way round they are in our custom error handler, then we'll be okay. Let's save our script and go over to our browser and see how this is all working out. Let's enter an invalid email address, and we'll submit the form and see what happens. As we can see, our trigger error function has generated an error, and because we specified e_user_error, it's been a fatal error, so the hyperlink was shown and the script terminated. So far so good. Let's take a look. If we put in a valid address, or a supposedly valid address, at what will happen when we hit the deliberate error that we introduced right at the beginning of last movie rather. What will happen when it hits the database connection variable that is empty? Let's have a look. This will not do what we probably hope it will do. In fact, it throws up two different error messages, and then it shows the thank you, we have added your comment to the database. So it's not doing what we want it to at all. Now this is very useful for us as programmers, because we're getting to see the undefined variable error, and we're also getting to see that exactly why that was a problem, that the argument was not a valid connection to MySQL. The reason that all three of these appeared was that in our script we didn't actually specify that any particular error should be thrown up by this line. We just let PHP automatically invoke this function with a different error number than either of the two error numbers we've selected here to cause a fatal error. So we're faced with a choice here. Either we keep on with this system of error handling, which allows for some errors and ignores others essentially, or allows the script to continue, I should say, while simply giving an error message, or we can take out this condition altogether and make every error that is generated a fatal error for the purpose of our custom error handler. Now this is less useful for us as programmers, but it may well be more useful in terms of stopping the users seeing things that we don't want them to see when an error happens. So if we go back to our browser, resubmit the data, as we can see, since every error is treated as a fatal error because we've left out the condition, the invalid connection variable, the deliberate error that we introduced at the beginning of last movie, has done what we wanted it to do. And the beauty of this is that we've done it all without having to introduce any funny little bits at the beginning or end of this line. So if there's an error with this line, or if there is an error with this line, then all of these would generate an error that would include the kind of format that we wanted, in this case the whoops at the beginning and the click here to go back hyperlink, and it would also stop executing the script so that we never reached this part of the script and ended up with an invalid piece of information being given to the user. That wraps it up for that chapter, and in our next chapter we're going to be looking at users, authentication, sessions and cookies.